This is going to sound completely insane, like the plot of a badly written B-movie thriller, but I swear on everything I own, every single word of this is true. It's the story of how my neighbor, a man who thought he owned the street, stole power from my solar panels, sued me when I disconnected his illegal tap, and then, in a fit of rage, used his luxury SUV to try and take me off the road for good. All over a few $100s worth of stolen electricity. You just can't make this stuff up, trust me. My name is Ethan Vance. I'm an electrical engineer by trade, and I moved to this incredible, planned development called Willow Creek outside of Portland. It was a little pocket of paradise nestled in the foothills, all tall pines, winding streets, and neighbors who actually waved. This wasn't just a house. It was my dream, my ultimate passion project. I'd spent 2 years designing what I called the Citadel of Self-Reliance. It was a custom modern build, absolutely decked out with technology. I had massive solar arrays on the roof, a commercial-grade battery wall in the sublevel, and a custom-coded energy management system that tracked consumption down to the millisecond. My yard was immaculate, my life was quiet, and behind my beautiful 9-foot perimeter fence, built specifically for privacy and noise abatement, I felt completely insulated from the world. For the first few months, it was absolute serenity. But Willow Creek, like any seemingly perfect place, had its resident serpent, Harlan Thorne. Harlan lived directly across the cul-de-sac, in a monstrous, over-decorated French provincial that looked perpetually ready for a Christmas holiday photo shoot, no matter the season. He was big, loud, and commanded attention, the self-appointed mayor of our 5-house loop. He was also the head of the neighborhood's very aggressive homeowners association, or HOA, and he ran it less like a civic duty and more like a feudal dictatorship. His power wasn't just financial, it was social. He'd lived there 20 years, knew everyone's secrets, and had a way of speaking that was always coded in condescension, even when he pretended to be friendly. From day one, Harlan hated my house. He hated the modern lines, he hated the fence, and he especially hated the visible solar panels, symbols, I guess, of my independence and my successful career, which he clearly resented. He'd corner me sometimes when I was getting the mail, always smiling, always leaning in a little too close. "That fancy grid you've got there, Ethan," he'd boom, loud enough for his wife to hear through the closed windows. "I hope you enjoy paying twice the property taxes for all that chrome and glass. You know, around here, we like things a little more traditional, things that blend in." I'd just shrug, offer a bland, "It works for me, Harlan," and walk away, but his disapproval was a thick, humid cloud hanging over the street. The peace was shattered, not by a letter from the HOA, but by a utility bill that looked like a financial typo. I'm a data guy, remember? My system showed I was only using about 40% of the power I was generating. I should have been making a profit on the grid. Instead, my usage was mysteriously double what my internal meters showed. It defied physics. I spent a week tearing apart my wiring, convinced I had a critical fault in my subpanel. But everything was tight, sealed, and perfect. Driven half crazy, I decided to conduct a physical inspection of my main service line, which ran low along the ground on the external side of my cedar fence, right before the meter. I got on my hands and knees with a flashlight and started tracing the thick, armored conduit, and that's when I found it. Hidden beneath a decorative, custom-built planter box, where the conduit briefly dipped below ground before the meter, was a crude, professional-grade splice. It was shielded perfectly from the street, positioned exactly where Harlan could access it from the small gap between his property and mine. From that splice, a thick, black industrial extension cord, the kind you use for welders, was run under the dirt, across the property line, and disappeared directly into the slab of Harlan's massive garage. The realization hit me like a physical blow, the cold, hard certainty that this man, this local kingpin, had been stealing from me, siphoning thousands of watts of my generated solar power, running his entire workshop, maybe even his hot tub, all on my dime. It wasn't just the money, it was the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of the violation. He was exploiting my engineering, my investment, my sanctuary. I spent the next 2 hours in a calm, almost robotic rage. I documented everything with my phone, taking hundreds of high-resolution images, video clips, and using my fluke meter to register the draw on the line before and after. I even drove down to the local hardware store and bought a locking security box to cover the splice point. I cut his line, coiled the incriminating wire, and sealed the box with industrial-strength epoxy. The theft was over, and the evidence was locked away. The next afternoon, Harlan was washing his prized possession, a huge, black Cadillac Escalade, the kind of vehicle that screamed overcompensation. He saw me coming, and that practiced, oily smile of his immediately appeared. "Ethan, fancy seeing you out here." "Say, my garage door opener started acting up mysteriously yesterday." "Weird, huh?" he drawled, the implication heavy as concrete. I stopped right there in the middle of the street, held up my phone, and played the video of the cable disappearing into his foundation. "Funny you mentioned that, Harlan. I found the culprit. It was this little unauthorized tap you ran directly from my main service line. You've been stealing my electricity for 6 months." His eyes went dead, the smile froze, then twisted into a mask of pure hate. But he recovered quickly. "That's ridiculous. That's a trash cord. You're losing it, Ethan. You're paranoid. Look, I know you city boys have thin skin, but maybe those panels of yours just aren't as efficient as you think. Don't go pointing fingers where they don't belong. The evidence is filed, Harlan. The utility company is being notified, and you have exactly 48 hours to remit payment for the estimated usage, or I'm filing a police report for grand theft." He dropped his wash rag, taking a step toward me. His voice was low, guttural. "You listen to me, you little tech punk. You think you can come into my neighborhood and start dictating terms? I know the sheriff. I know the mayor. You keep digging around where you don't belong, and I will make sure your fancy life here becomes a living hell. You are going to regret moving into Willow Creek." The next morning, the hell began. I stepped outside and saw it. My beautiful cedar fence, the one I had stained by hand, was defaced with thick, sloppy streaks of fire engine red paint. It looked like blood running down the wood. And tacked to the center door of my garage was a handwritten note, all block letters and jagged rage. "Back OFF or pay the price." It was beyond vandalism. It was a declaration of war. That same day, I spent $4,000 on a military-grade security upgrade, multiple 4K cameras with thermal and IR, covering every inch of the perimeter, his driveway, and the approach on the street. I was done relying on the local authorities. I was building my own case, piece by agonizing piece. A few days later, I was talking to Mrs. Delaney, the kindest woman on the street, who was trimming roses near my mailbox. She looked nervous, glancing repeatedly toward Harlan's house. "Ethan, please be careful," she whispered, leaning closer. "Harlan, he's done things before. Years ago, he had a feud with the Peterson family over a boat trailer. They woke up one morning and found a whole section of their new retaining wall had been mysteriously knocked down. He never got caught. He just has a way of making people disappear." Her warning solidified my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting the neighborhood bully that everyone was too afraid to challenge. Then came the second act of theft. My phone buzzed at 1:47 a.m. The new cameras were flawless. There was Harlan, creeping out of his garage, wearing thick work gloves and a hoodie pulled tight, carrying a long, thin coil of cable. He tried a new approach this time, feeding the cable through the storm drain access point near the street. A much trickier, less obvious tap. He thought he was being so clever, circumventing the old splice location. He grunted and sweated, struggling to push the thick cord into the ground, all of it perfectly lit and recorded. I didn't confront him. I didn't even call the police right away. I let him finish, let him think he was safe. I simply logged the footage, backed it up to the cloud, and added it to the growing file. But the real escalation, the move that truly defined Harlan's megalomania, was the lawsuit that arrived a week later. Harlan Thorne was suing me. His claim was a masterpiece of pathological lying. He alleged that my unauthorized tampering with the power line, cutting his illegal tap, had caused a massive, destructive power surge that fried his entire subpanel, ruined his industrial-grade welder, and shorted out his custom smart lighting system, costing him over $25,000. And, of course, the obligatory claim for severe emotional and psychological distress due to my stalking and aggressive accusations. It was a brilliant, terrifying tactical move. He knew the police wouldn't touch the vandalism or the first theft easily, so he went on the offense, forcing me to spend thousands on defense just to protect myself from his lies. The neighborhood atmosphere curdled. Harlan ramped up his campaign of defamation. He started telling people I was suffering from a breakdown, that I was a dangerously paranoid newcomer who was trying to harass a long-time, respected member of the community. People started avoiding eye contact when I walked my dog. The sheer, exhausting isolation was worse than the cost of the lawsuit. But the final, terrifying crossing of the line was yet to come. I walked out one Tuesday morning to go to work, and my car, a sensible German sedan I loved, was sitting on its brake rotors. All 4 tires slashed. Deep, clean, intentional cuts. This was no longer about money or property lines. This was about control, intimidation, and raw, personal malice. I called the sheriff again. They took the report, offered sympathy, and stated the obvious. No witness, no direct proof. It was just one more data point in a terrifying pattern. The confrontation that followed wasn't planned. It was an ambush. I was driving home Friday evening, coming back from the repair shop after getting the new tires installed, and I had to stop at a red light at the main intersection leading into Willow Creek. As I glanced in my side mirror, I saw Harlan's massive, black Escalade, the one he was so proud of, appear seemingly out of nowhere, stopping in the adjacent turn lane. He caught my eye. He didn't wave, he didn't glare, he just gave me that same sickeningly confident, cold smile. And then I saw his jaw clench and his right foot stomp down. The light was still red for him, but he didn't care. He roared out of his lane, cutting across the intersection, aiming his nearly 3-ton SUV directly at my driver's side door. I didn't even have time to scream. The impact was violent, a sound that felt like it ripped the air apart. My sedan was thrown sideways, spinning wildly before slamming into a light pole. Everything went black for a second, followed by the ringing silence of crushed metal and deployed airbags. I was dazed, bloody, but miraculously, somehow alive. I fumbled my way out of the wreckage, and there was Harlan, already out of his truck, playing the same tired role, screaming at the bystanders, pointing at my wrecked car. He ran the light. He came out of nowhere. He's completely deranged, that man. You saw it. He hit me. But this time, I wasn't scared. I was ice cold. My dash cam, running on backup power, had recorded everything. The moment his Escalade surged forward, the sound of his engine roaring as he floored the gas pedal, the moment of impact. It was all captured in stunning 4K detail. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder, disguised as road rage. The courtroom a few weeks later was surreal. Harlan's attorney, a smug man named Sinclair, was brilliant, presenting Harlan as the pillar of the community, the long-suffering victim of a deranged, vengeful neighbor who couldn't handle a simple HOA disagreement. Harlan testified, tears welling up in his eyes, describing the terrifying moment I darted out and forced him to crash his beloved truck. When my lawyer, Miriam, stood up, the atmosphere shifted. She didn't shout or argue. She simply pointed to the projection screen. Mr. Thorne claims this was an accident, she said calmly. We disagree. We will now present the chronology of malice. For the next 20 minutes, the court was silent, save for the hum of the projector. She started with the utility telemetry charts showing the unauthorized power draw. Then, the first video, Harlan, at 2 a.m., running the illegal cable to his garage. Next, the shocking sight of the red paint being sprayed onto my fence. Then, the video of him, just days later, attempting the second power tap through the storm drain. Finally, the grand finale, the dashcam footage. The angle clearly showed the red light Harlan was facing, the revving of his engine, the sudden, intentional acceleration aimed directly at my car, and the fact that he never once touched the brakes. The mask fell completely. Harlan slumped in his chair, his face gray. Sinclair, his attorney, was sweating, frantically whispering to his client. Miriam finished by presenting the documentation showing Harlan's history of intimidation and his prior disputes with neighbors that had inexplicably resulted in property damage. The judge didn't even need to retire for long. The verdict was swift, total, and utterly satisfying. Not only did she dismiss Harlan's ludicrous $25,000 lawsuit and order him to pay for all my damages, legal fees, and medical bills, but she personally referred the full file, including the crash footage and the repeated theft, to the district attorney, recommending the maximum charges for attempted assault with a deadly weapon the SUV, fraud, and multiple counts of criminal property destruction. Harlan Thorne was done. The aftermath was the sweetest part. The news rippled through Willow Creek, not like a wave, but like a thunderclap. The man who had terrorized the neighborhood for years, who had manipulated the HOA and used fear to enforce his will, was revealed to be a petty, malicious thief and a near murderer. The dam of silence broke. Mrs. Delaney, the sweet woman who warned me, gave testimony to the DA about the Petersons and the retaining wall. Another neighbor confessed that Harlan had forced him to trim a 100-year-old oak tree under threat of a crippling HOA fine, simply because Harlan didn't like the shadow it cast on his pool. The stories piled up, confirming that I hadn't been dealing with a normal bad neighbor, but a sociopath using the cover of suburban life to bully and exploit. Harlan sold his house in a fire sale, accepting a ridiculously low offer, and disappeared before his criminal trial even started, gone under the cloak of night, just like the thief he was. Today, my fence is rebuilt, my car is new, and my life is peaceful again. But the best part? The neighborhood. The community found its spine. The neighbors started talking to each other, not about Harlan, but about fixing the community pool, starting a garden club, and electing a new, legitimate HOA board. My fight wasn't just about reclaiming my electricity. It was about reclaiming the soul of Willow Creek. So, here's my question for you, the people watching this. Given that Harlan Thorne was clearly escalating to attempted violence, do you think I should have pursued the civil case only? Or was I morally obligated to see him face criminal charges, even if it meant prolonging the conflict and putting myself in more danger? Did I go too far, or did I simply serve justice that the community had been too afraid to demand? Let me know your thoughts and tell me what you would have done in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about the absolute insanity of suburban life, hit that like and subscribe button. I've got a lot more to tell.